Welcome to our first three takes on AI podcast, where our three different perspectives come together to explore how artificial intelligence, AI, is shaping business value, technology, and real world results. Let's meet the minds behind the takes. I'm Brian Silverman, Chief Solution Officer at ABS AI Consulting, focused on the tech side of AI, what's real, what's hype, and what's next. Campbell Robertson joins us as the founder of Boxwood Strategy Group. He focuses on the business side where strategy meets measurable value. And Mike Mulfelder is the founder of Calm Ocean Sales. He brings AI to life with practical implementation stories from the field. Together, we bring you the three fresh perspectives on AI, real conversations, and the occasional surprise guest. Join our conversation at 3takesonai.com. Subscribe to be notified of future podcasts, and share your take on AI with us as well. I'm Brian, and Mike and Campbell and I welcome you again to our first podcast on the MIT study on the state of business of AI and our take on shadow AI. On with the show. Welcome, Mike and Campbell, to our first podcast. Great to have you here. We have a great topic this morning or this afternoon, depending on when you might be listening, and that is there's a great study from MIT, the Gen AI Divide, the state of AI in the business of 2025. And it's a great study because it's gotten more hype than either the Blue Jays maybe winning the World Series or Taylor Swift's latest album, because everybody is hyping the one statistic, which was that 95% of the AI projects they surveyed didn't deliver any value. It's funny that that's the headline, but the report actually says 5% of them are making lots of money. So that's the other side of this. But I think the other unique thing, and I think one of the things that we'll deliver on this podcast, is that we're doing something really unique, and that is we've all actually read the report. It's obvious from a lot of the writing out there that many of the reporters are reporting back on another article and haven't actually dug in the way we have and how to analyze and look at the report. So the first thing I want to do is real quickly, they surveyed 52 organizations and they reviewed 300 projects. So we can decide whether that's material to the broader AI world or not. But there's still a lot of good information in there that we can talk about. And I thought, Campbell, why don't we start with you and your take on what you think about the report and what your takeaways were?
Yeah, I think yeah, the hype of the 95% is obviously just to get attention, clickbait, so to speak. And I agree with you that the 5% that succeeded obviously are succeeding very well. And it raises a couple of areas that I thought the study didn't necessarily address. And one of them is about measurable ROI. The ROI and cost benefit analysis obviously is, focused on all the numbers. And so if you run the numbers initially, and what I was seeing in some past experiences with projects that we did is that how you measure it, how you categorize it doesn't necessarily fit to traditional ROI models. So again, the definition of ROI, how they measured it, I'm not necessarily sure that they addressed it effectively enough for an AI-based project. The other piece that I had concerns about, and again, this was reflected exactly in the experience that I had with seeing AI projects being deployed, whether it was a chat, sort of a chat or a RAG model, or even getting into agentic. The time to value expectation, I think, of executives that may have been reported on the study is, like 3 to 6 months. I want to see results in a 3 to 6 month window. That's just not going to happen. What I was actually seeing is the reality of, getting from pilots to not even full implementation, 10 to 12 months. So I think expectation was wrong, and the 95% reporting, zero measurable ROI, probably didn't necessarily give it enough time and or looked at the effectiveness. Now, the one other thing I'm going to say, and then I'll pass it back, is the focus on the ones that were successful had vertical focus and deep integration. And the other ones, the 95%, didn't focus on the vertical depth and the integration right off the bat. So I think that that is an indicator of where AI is going to be successful. And that begs the question, front office versus back office. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point that maybe the people they interviewed in the organizations, they weren't far enough along, and they maybe it surfaced more frustration than really an ROI discussion. Mike, what's your take?
I'm agreeing with Campbell, and I think there's a lot more to the study into where we are with AI overall. And in the study, I know that they do talk about the integration or lack of integration. I think it's a little bit even different than that, and there's a few flaws right now, none of
Mm,
which is surprising if you've been doing this long enough to see, cycles in technology. And one is, and again, these are, it's my opinion. I haven't done an MIT study, though I live near MIT. One is you've got people who are implementing these projects in the same fashion that they've been implementing technology projects for the last 30 plus years, um, and missing important steps. One really important one is the underlying process. And the underlying processes, if they are not addressed, not only do you not get better, you get worse faster, and in this
mm,
case, um, at warp speed. And then, failing to comprehend that it is a technology implementation. So it's going to take time. And just because it's AI doesn't mean it's going to, and I'm really generalizing and taking a leap here. It's not going to self-implement. There's still a lot of work to
mm,
it. But and then the last thing I'll say is, you could, look at the news of the last week or so in terms of layoffs and restructuring, and you might find that if you went and talked to a bunch of CFOs right now, that they will tell you that AI has been wildly successful because they're getting to, reduce workforces by thousands to tens of thousands of people, and that makes it, an economic success.
Ye- Yeah, I think you had mentioned before about using also focusing on different tools that and looking at different ways to implement it. And I think that also feeds that the study doesn't always show or the focus on the um, expertise and consulting skills that are unique to AI. And so I think looking at AI from your point, what you just said, looking at it from a different perspective than a traditional IT or application implementation is important.
Yeah, I think to that point, like the expertise that's being needed. I mean, as Mike alluded to, there are these cycles that everybody goes through. We've seen it before, but to a certain degree, the sort of the third body problem, if I want to call it that way, with AI is that there are competing objectives that we haven't seen in the past.
Mm,
So if whether it was internet, whether it was any type of technological implementation that we've seen over the years, it was constrained, it was understood. But where AI really sits is that it's not necessarily as well understood from the impact that we'll have. And so these competing objectives are regulation, compliance,
mm,
the cognitive impact to the worker, the productivity gains, so the positives and the negatives. There's a broader array of these competing objectives associated with a successful project. And from a consultancy point of view, you have to incorporate all of those moving parts, those competing objectives, and each
mm,
customer becomes different. So it's not necessarily cookie cutter. But again, that's my view on if you're picking a consultancy or if you're picking expertise to help you, you have to have that broader array because change management is going to be critical. Training and change management is
mm,
fundamental to AI success. And again, I can reflect on past experiences with major digital transformation projects where the training and the change management budget gets thrown out the window as the project timeline starts getting shorter and shorter and they're not getting to the point they need. But in AI, you fundamentally need change management and you fundamentally need those components associated with training so people know what they're doing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually, as you all know, I launched a Business of AI roadmap class on Udemy that was really focused on a business and a process. And really, it's change management, but it's also about bringing the business back and how does it get impacted. And I think that broad impact is much different than, Mike, as you were saying, Campbell, of any technology we've seen. But I want to shift it around a little bit. One thing that really caught my eye, and one of the reasons we created the title that we did for this podcast, is they actually came around on page 8 of the study. I don't think people got that far in, but they talked about that. What is interesting is that it is actually shadow AI. They said actually it's the implementation of AI not through official channels. It's about using things like ChatGPT or Copilot or Perplexity or other tools where companies are really seeing ROI. And I think that's actually, Campbell, you and I were talking before this, that actually that's probably why the hype and the excitement and the anxiety, if you will, about the rapid adoption of AI and looking for value is there because we all see value every day because we get to touch it and use it and understand it. And we had talked previously about the difference between a consumer value or a consumer approach versus an enterprise approach to AI. And I don't know if you both have some context to think about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good topic to dig into because, you know, again, I don't know how success is defined. It's defined one way in an MIT study. It's defined a different way by you, by me, by Campbell, by, like I said, by the CFO of a company like Amazon. Um, but so much of this also goes to the expectation, right? So,
Mm,
and the definition. So, to your point, I'm using ChatGPT or Perplexity or Anthropic, and it's changed the way I work. It's made me far more productive. You could argue that it's made me smarter in terms of my ability to get and maybe even synthesize information. So, on the one hand, yeah, wildly successful. But if I've implemented a solution at an enterprise level,
mm,
and I'm making numbers up, I spend $1 million, and the business doesn't improve by $3 or $4 million. Well, is that success or is that
mm,
failure? And some say, well, failure. But are the interactions between the employees, between employees and customers, have they improved? Have our cycle times improved?
mm,
And it may be much harder to measure in dollars. So, one of the things that I read, I think it was about a week or so ago, was finally this recognition that maybe the economic measures that we've been using or are using right
mm,
now to determine the overall success of the macro economy may be outdated.
mm.
And I think the same thing may be true here. How we measure success of AI may be different than the way we have traditionally measured success.
I
And
think that
yeah, sorry, go
I
ahead.
think that's key, and I think Campbell, you had highlighted that as well. So I want to shift a little bit because Campbell, you've written a great amount on your Substack and blog about governance. And one of the things that I got really interested in was they had this great example in the MIT study of an attorney using the publicly available Chat GPT, I believe, to create the initial briefs for clients, and then go ahead later and use the internal tools that are more legal focused. And the reason that it got me interested was it shows a lack of, to me, a little bit of lack of governance or guidance as to when to use or not to use a publicly available model. If you were an attorney sharing client information into a public model, that would seem to be a gap. And I think that governance and guidance issue of this shadow AI is something very, very important.
Yeah. um, yeah, definitely. The attorney example, or I think just recently too, there was a consultant who was working for an organization that basically put the entire database of an organization up into the public realm, just to try to run some analysis without really thinking of the impact. Again, I think it comes back to shadow AI is it's interesting because when we used to do cost benefit analysis, or even just an analysis of trying to find the benefit of better technology, whether it was document management per se, we used to look at cheat sheets, right? So how does an employee actually do their work? How do they navigate the policies, the procedures, standard operating documents, et cetera, to actually get their job done on a daily basis? And that helped us map, the how we would change the underlying processes and potentially impact policy change to make things better. I think shadow AI potentially has even it's a downside, it's a negative, it's a risk, but at the same time, it proves a point that individuals, workers are using it because there's a gap. And that becomes a
Mm.
gap in solution design. That becomes a gap that has to be addressed. However, from a governance point of view, yeah, there's a huge factor associated with that, putting the organization at risk. And companies that I'm dealing with, they're trying to understand, okay, what are my employees putting into the public realm? Are they putting corporate IP into the realm? Are they putting PII data into the public realm? Because once it goes into the public realm, into these models, it's there. It's there forever. What are the risks, or what are the penalties that I'm going to have to pay as an organization if I'm now operating out of California, out of Colorado, or if I'm a global company and I want to work with EU-based organizations, what are the fees associated with it, and how do I mitigate those risks? So yeah, the governance discussion, even though governance is something that organizations don't necessarily understand, has to be had. And I think that becomes the larger impact, whether we define what ROI is from the MIT study or not. The major discussion is going to be, how do I control? How do I mitigate risk? And that's always the hard discussion.
Yeah, I think the other part of shadow AI is that it's really to bring it out of the shadow and make it part of your strategy overall. And how do
Yeah.
you don't turn it off, or ban it, for because I don't think it any organization I've seen publicly that's banned it doesn't mean it's not use it. They just use it when they get home, kind of thing. But
Yeah.
it's really, how do you take the value that's being proven here? And there are other good examples that I also highlight in my roadmap where organizations are using these tools for great value. And so, how do you bring that forward? And I think it also comes down to training your organization. I'm sure this attorney should know, but maybe is not aware of the issue of putting confidential information in a public model. So
Yeah.
maybe there's those kind of training is important. Mike, I know you were going to say something and I interrupted you, and I apologize for that.
No, 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 it's fine. That's the nature of the conversation. Yeah, so in the realm of whether it's shadow AI or governance, however we want to put it, and again, it goes to the idea of are these projects truly failing or not? And I'll go back to this idea of cycle times. If as the example, let's say I wanted to start doing business in a new state or a new country, the ability to do that and to do the research historically has taken hours, weeks, months, and cost us a lot of money. Now I can credibly get answers to my questions in minutes. That has real value. Or, I mean, I give you even for me, a personal example just from the last few months. One of my clients is a quantum computing company. Now, I don't know anything or didn't know anything about quantum computing. Barely got out of high school, barely got into a state college in New Hampshire, barely graduated from there. So I am not a physicist, not a scientist. And I got about 4 or so weeks into the assignment, and I was honestly really struggling to understand the concepts, the technology, even the language. And what I did was I took different information, both from within the client and externally, and put it together into a notebook and said, build me an AI for Dummies workbook. Took, I don't know, 2.5, 3 minutes, gave me a 3-page document, and all of a sudden I could begin to understand quantum computing all by myself. Didn't have to go to training, didn't didn't have to take time of my coworkers, improved my productivity. So I don't know how you measure that, but that's real, and I think that's how a lot of people are using it now. Conversely, I'm back to this point of, am I getting ROI? If I've spent money on an AI solution to improve my sales forecasting, and my forecasting doesn't improve, my close rate doesn't improve, you know, I can argue, well, I'm not getting ROI. Well, the flaw may be that it's not a tool that works. That you can't AI enable sales forecasting in a complex sale.
Mm.
Too many variables, too many human factors, and maybe all it tells you is, are we engaged in these deals? Because again, not back to the problem of integration. I've put in an AI solution for forecasting, but if it doesn't properly integrate to the variety of tools in my sales and marketing stack, from email to phone to calendar, Google Calendar, what have you, I'm not going to necessarily get correct and accurate information on engagement.
Yeah, I think you've raised a really good point, and again, it comes back to the study, and it's if you look at front office versus back office, it'd be interesting to understand the use or the impact of shadow AI within the front office realm versus the back office realm. So to your point, front office is there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people factor associated with like selling, negotiating, network, all of the factors associated with marketing, communication on the front office, I think is harder to implement AI at this point in time. And that's probably where shadow AI is being used because people are trying to connect all of those things individually. Now, back office is to a certain degree more constrained. Finance, HR, supply chain, manufacturing, distribution, all of those factors. I think that's where you started to see the success coming with the 5%, because they focused on the back office. But it does raise a really good discussion about, where is shadow AI happening and what do you try to do to maximize the benefit of it from a consumer point of view, but at the same time seeing benefit from an organization. And I think it's harder to measure on the front office myself at this point in time.
I agree. And I'm going to stop in the interest of time and making sure we keep to the time for our audience.
Yeah.
I thought I would summarize the takeaways that I have, and you can tell me if I missed something. And then the first one is I'd recommend people go out and read the study. We're going to have attached to where this podcast is published on our website, again at 3takesonai.com. We'll provide links to the study and other articles that we've all written and we find informative, and start there. The second thing is, I think Campbell and Mike, you both made a really good point, and that is to focus on the time to value and not thinking about a short time. It's easy to early on get excited about investing a lot of time and money and not seeing immediate value, but it's probably a longer horizon than a lot of these research reports are looking at, and then you will see value. Shadow AI is going to be around. It's really time to bring it out into the light and provide the right governance and training and things that will make your organization leverage it and see the real value, and maybe and help your employees and organization do a better job. So those are the things that I took away. Did I miss anything?
Well done. You're like a real life AI, the way you synthesized all that information.
Well, you both have your note takers. I have a pen and paper. So we are thanking everybody for listening on our first one. Our next podcast is going to be about the AI bubble. We'll talk a little bit about what this hype is and is it real. There are a lot of different research and a lot of different people having opinions, of course. And so we'll share our takes on AI. You have an opportunity to provide your take on our AI. So add our fourth take, give us your feedback, and we look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. Thank you, everybody.